victims. Force is as pitiless to the person who possesses it or thinks he does as it is to its victims. The person who applies force not only kills the individual at whom he aims the force, but also himself. You know, the greatest power of the Odyssey, if I could just stop for just a second, is that it says it takes a long time to come home after a war. The battle at Troy took 10 years, and then took Odysseus 10 years to get back home. We have next door to us a Vietnam vet who's not home yet. I've taught classes. I've had entire classes of Vietnam vets. Can't come home yet. It takes incredible understanding. This beautiful man who lives next door to me lives in a house that was left him by his aunt. He's incapable of work. And every night when the McNeil-Lehrer report shows the pictures of these young guys who have died, he takes a wine bottle and puts a carnation in it and puts it on his front doorstep. That's about the only encounter he can make with life. I have a colleague at St. Cloud State who spends his entire life in this town just looking for people who haven't made it home yet from Vietnam. And the same also happened in Desert Storm, and it's going to happen in Iraq. So the Odyssey, it takes a long time to come home after a war. Force is as pitiless to the man who possesses it or thinks he does as it is to its victims. The victims are crushed by force. The person applying it is intoxicated with it. The truth is, nobody is power or force. Nobody possesses it. The human race is not divided up in the Illiad into conquered persons, slaves, suppliant on the one hand, and conquerors or chiefs on the other. It's hard to tell when you read the Iliad whether Homer loves the Trojans more than the Greeks or the Greeks more than the Trojans. He sees both of them as caught in a terrible, terrible conflict that's beyond their control. And the best man that he finds is among the Trojans, Hector. And it looks in the Iliad, when you first read it, that there are people who kill other people, and looks like it's divided up into those who win and those who lose. It says if you read it carefully, there are no winners and there are no losers. People are just caught up in force which destroys them both. In this poem, there is not a single person who does not at one time or another have to bow his neck to force. It's infinitely better on the moment of death never to have looked back and seen that you have squashed another person. There's a wonderful proverb, the good die easily. Those who have spent their lifetime crushing others don't. The true hero, the true subject, the center of the Iliad is force. So the Iliad is not a story of the Trojan War. This film is all off. Jackson's a great big film. But the true subject of the Iliad is something invisible. It's that you never want to get into a position where you're forcing another person to do something. Because that destroys you or it destroys them. You don't want to crush another individual. Force as man's instrument, force as man's master. Once you taste the poison of force, it's hard to feel its antidote, love. And that's why it takes so long to come home from a war. Once you've felt the frenzy and the kind of a lust that's hidden in this ability to destroy another with a gun, it's very, very difficult to come back and embrace as an intimate. Police forces know that. When an individual in upholding the law has to shoot a criminal, there's immediately a psychiatrist brought in. Because we know how destructive force is, even when it's used correctly. We just weren't, despite everything that Darwinian thought tells us, we are not fitted for killing others or for using force on them. And the soul rebels against that and loses its ability to love. The human soul in this poem is shown always in its relationship to force. It occurs in this way. The human being is swept away. It's blinded by the force it thinks it can direct. I watched CNN. I watched a beautiful young man, 22, 23 years of age, who was interviewed by a reporter just after a military convoy had been ambushed on its way into Baghdad. And the guy was a beautiful person. The reporter was asking him about what had happened, and started to talk about it, and then he said, and then they shot the person sitting next to me in the car. He says, I don't know what happened to me. I was caught up in a frenzy. I can't even understand it this time. He said, I didn't care at whom I aimed that gun. And he said, I did aim it at people. He said, I don't understand that frenzy. And I was watching D-Day stories, and it was the same story. That we think we can